All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, the depressing subject is you had a piece of this book you wanted me to read, which I did
Mhm.
yesterday. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, we just were able to play with language well enough to get it on there. But I do think a lot of the stuff we have talked about, but it's going to be kind of consolidated into one episode here. Uh,
And that's actually a good point, and one of the reasons I wanted you to read that chapter on because I've referenced the book before, and basically it is written like a prosecution's case at a Nuremberg 2.0 trial. So
mhm,
it is essentially long interviews. Every chapter is an interview with someone who was either victimized by um, the commie cough and more importantly the response to it, or an expert in the field like Dr. Malone. And
mhm.
so after reading the Dr. Malone chapter, I thought you should read this and walk us through the witchcraft, because my takeaway from his specifically, but a lot of the rest of the book, is something I've been ranting about for a while now, which is, um, we talked, man, when was it? I feel like it was over a year ago now. That was it, the Atlantic that ran that big article on, yeah, mistakes were made. Now let's just move on.
Yeah, the amnesty article. Yeah,
The amnesty
I think
article.
that has been about a year.
Yeah. And so that's been about a year or a little over now at this point. And uh my contention was hell no, because one, all of this stuff that we're allowed to talk about now, we knew it beforehand. No, Dr. Fauci, the science didn't change. No, Dr. Brooks, the science didn't change. The politics changed. All of this stuff was known beforehand. But the kind of the added element that Dr. Malone chapter added was, not only was all of this known beforehand, and you can add to this all the Pfizer documents that are coming out, and Naomi Wolf and her team that have been going through all of these Pfizer documents that have been being released. Not only was it all known, it's all worse than we thought it was.
What we were referring to is the Emily Oster article in The Guardian, October
October.
31st, 2022. So about a year and change, year and 5 months.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
No. In fact, hell no.
well, before we get too far into this, I just wanted to, whoops, what did I just do? Yeah, no, no, bring that back. I want to show a headline from the other day in Nature, and this kind of sets the tone, I think. Oh my goodness, that's a big number.
The hell?
Trust the experts. Peer-reviewed literature. We're the experts. For those that are just listening, the headline is in Nature, more than 10,000 research papers were retracted in 2023, a new record. Oh, that better be a record. That's not
Jeez.
papers that weren't accepted. That's papers retracted. And considering there was only one side of the aisle that was getting their papers accepted, that's that's pretty big. So
Mm-hmm.
trust the experts because they've got the peer-reviewed research behind it. Small little headline in Nature a while later that hardly anybody reads Nature, 10,000 articles were retracted. It's like the correction on the New York Times headline that's on page 20 of the
Yeah.
next issue.
Yikes.
Yeah, yikes. Well, did you read you marked that chapter for me, but did you read the next chapter or was that
No,
where you were?
that is where I had stopped. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if I want to spoil it for you because it's actually very relevant because the next chapter is the whistleblower from the company
Ah, yes, that's right.
that was overseeing the research by
Yeah,
the
I
big
looked at
P
the intro
company.
of that. Yeah, I looked at the
Yeah.
intro of that, and I hadn't. And so far as I know, I think she's still in a civil case for unlawful termination.
It has to be over because they were talking about that's why it took her so long to come out.
Okay.
Because the civil case was locked. The what do they call it when the judge says you can't share anything from the trial?
Oh yeah, there was a gag order on it.
Gag order. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And And I remember that because it was so, like so much of all of this, it was so blatantly illegal. We have whistleblower protections and we have them for a reason. And they were blatantly violated and no one cared.
Well, and so you brought up Naomi Wolf. That's why I'm going to spoil it a little bit for you, because if what she says is correct, then Naomi Wolf's work is actually pointless because as bad as they are, the release documents are doctored documents.
Mm, holy
That's
crap.
that's as good as they can make it look. That's how bad it
Be
was.
because the stuff that I've been hearing from her when I've heard her on the shows I listen to, the stuff she talks about is pretty damning.
Yeah, that's as good as they can make it look. That's
And so that would be, I assume that would include that clip we played of RFK on
don't
what's it?
say that name. The
Why
YouTube
would you say
gods.
that name? Um, on Howie Mandel's show, and he made the point that where they got the number from was a ridiculous sample. It was like one person in one group and two people in the other group, and then so they said, "Oh, 100%."
I think he was referring to the children in that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
the adults there were greater numbers, but it still wasn't what you thought it was.
exactly.
Because
And that,
I know the children that I believe what was the final. Sorry for the dogs. The final was one person got sick in one group and two in the other, and they said stop it here because it's 100% increase.
yeah, and I hadn't even heard that one before until I watched that Howie Mandel interview because I was looking for the clip that we played a few weeks ago of, well, here, I've got it on my phone. Let me bring it up for you. I can play it. Okay. I mean, no, we don't need to hear that.
Yeah, and just having that for those that are you know, oh, you're not going to get pushed from YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Just for showing that video, which was on YouTube, we got a strike, which I had to go through the process of getting that reversed. And thankfully we did. And the reasoning I used was this is already on YouTube on Howie Mandel's channel.
Hmm.
And I guess somewhere in the system, they're like, well, I guess that is a good argument that if it already exists there, we can't cancel the person with 60 followers that
Yeah.
which they probably I'm surprised they didn't because I mean who gets what's the big kerfuffle if we get a strike and can't come 60 people no maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
you know well we had that one video that had 500 views randomly but I don't know if I just titled it well or something and YouTube loved us for one day but but yeah, so we're gonna trudge through this topic first. Then we wanted to talk some sports. You wanted to talk about baseball injuries, I believe, at some point.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
We can get into that if we have time.
and I wanted to talk some football off season because the Texans are making me excited and making me hate them at the same time.
All right. Well, then
Yeah.
let's not dwell on this too much because it's very depressing, but it especially I wore my the best dads get promoted to grandpa shirt because
Don't worry,
that's
I've got your back.
okay. That's good. Because this crap matters because it's not a conspiracy theory to say that they're going to do it again because they're already talking about doing it again. That's what this, I can't remember what it's called, but there's this new uh pandemic agreement that the WHO is pushing and people are signing on to, and they're being very careful to call it an agreement, even though it has the power of a treaty, because if it was actually a treaty, it would have to be ratified by the Senate. And essentially, what it does is it turns over public health power to the WHO in an international pandemic.
Yeah, but I think if they tried to enforce it because it's not ratified by the Senate, it still is unenforceable. So it really kind of depends
It,
on who's in power at the time.
exactly. And so, what you would have would most likely be what we already had, which is certain states are going to go along with it and certain states won't.
Hmm.
But it gives cover to the Gavin Newsoms of the world that, hey, I'm just following the WHO guidelines.
Hmm. Well, I mean, you can't be on YouTube if you didn't follow the hoot guidelines.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's dive into this. The first part of the chapter, he basically just explains who he is again. So we've been through that on and he's got the credentials. So look up his bio. Don't look at Wiki because it's probably going to be a bunch of crap.
Oh yeah.
But so once you get past that, they asked what his waking up moment was. And this I thought was a little bit important because anybody who says, I knew from the beginning, they're probably
Hmm.
the people who took the descent as religion type.
Yeah.
They just wanted to fight the government. And realistically, I came on gradually too. I was a little faster than most because it started to look like my same fight with the Food and Drug Administration on nutrition.
Mm.
Because for 15 years I've been telling people, you know what, that food pyramid's bullshit. You know what, the protein recommendations are bullshit. All of these things and why. Not just that they are, but why and why this other data that we've been collecting matters because the at that point with the RDA recommendations, they were completely based on the grain lobbies and the sugar lobbies, and you can actually timeline,
Yeah.
high fructose corn syrup is right in line with adding a tariff to Cuban or not Cuban, but Dominican sugar cane
Hmm.
and all these other countries that were growing a lot of sugar cane. So you can actually follow the monetary lines on where your recommendations came from. Because remember, some of these were touted as the savior. High fructose corn syrup, you don't have to eat sugar anymore because sugar is bad for you. Well, it turns out high fructose corn syrup was worse.
Hmm.
Oh, saturated fats are bad for you. Switch to vegetable oils. Right in line with when Crisco was invented, right?
Hmm.
It's and also vegetable oils, a use for all of these overgrown vegetables, which we've been providing subsidies for these farmers. So they all go. Our food pyramid is based on that, not on your health. The
Hmm.
zero point 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight RDA recommendation is based on a completely sedentary, bedridden individual to not die. That's not going to help you much if you actually get out of bed.
Yeah. Back up a second though, because before you get to his wake up moment, something I kind of knew, but I didn't know the extent of it, is when he's talking about what he was doing right at the beginning of the outbreak. Is I remember that he had said before that he got a call from people he knows in authority that says, "Hey, get your people ready. Something is happening in China." What I didn't know was that the focus of his lab, the entire focus of it was repurposing drugs, was finding new uses for existing drugs. That was the entire purpose of his lab. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they did. And that to me was a giant, you know, blaring siren of it's it was known all along and it's worse than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I mean people have used this example before. There are grandmas in South America who take Viagra because it's a blood pressure pill,
Mm-hmm.
and it's generic Viagra is cheap now, and it,
Well,
it works well.
yeah, and it even says on their little pamphlets, it's for this reason, it works for this, which is the guy reason. Then it
Mm-hmm.
says for purposes of blood pressure, this is the dosage that you should take and da da da.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the same pamphlet no matter what you get it for, and it says both.
Exactly. So it's not like not only the idea of repurposed drugs isn't new, it's there was an entire lab by one of the most um, credentialed people in the field dedicated just to that.
Mm-hmm. And then basically what happened was these other two players came in and they took the information he brought to them on the RNA and said, "Oh, well, we can make this better." Is basically
Mm-hmm.
what happened. And what they did was they replaced the uh, the amino acid uridine which anybody who knows anything about DNA, it's AUGC, just three or just four amino acids, and they do all of these different combinations to give us our genetic code. And they took the U out and replaced it with a synthetic version of it, which caused it to be more stable in the body. Because what his problem was when he was working with RNA as a vessel to create kind of like a jab. He wasn't there yet. He admits he wasn't there yet
Mm-hmm.
because he kept having an inflammation problem. The inflammation problem was because of its unstable nature in the body and then creating these proteins and going all around. So they made it more stable. Not only was it more stable in the body, but it was more shelf stable. Remember back in the early days when they were like, we need negative 80-degree refrigerators, and
Yes.
that's why you can only get it in certain places. But then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you could get it in the 7-Eleven parking lot
Mm-hmm.
because of that pseudouridine. So that made it shelf stable. Just like trans fats make your Doritos last 20 years on a shelf.
Which from the layman's point of view, my first thought is, well, wait a minute, that flies in the face of why he was doing mRNA in the first place. Because backing up even further,
Yeah, he was working at DNA. Yeah.
when he first got into this research, he was fascinated by, and I don't remember if it was when he was at the Salk Institute or somewhere else, that gene therapy was very new because we hadn't unlocked, we hadn't mapped the genome for that long yet. DNA was only discovered what in the 60s, was it? That the guys who discovered this won the Nobel Prize for it. So this was very new when he was first getting into it, and the idea of gene therapy. Well, the problem with gene therapy is if you change your DNA is changed, and we can't do anything about that. We
Mm-hmm.
can't fix that if there's some negative side effect that goes along with that we realize down the road. Oh, well, we fixed this problem, but now we have all these other problems. So his, eureka moment was, well, wait a minute. What if we use RNA? Because RNA already does kind of what we want it to do to begin with gene therapy, but RNA isn't persistent.
Yeah, because it basically lasts just a few hours.
It
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 it transcribes, it makes the protein, and then it's gone. It's not
so
going to one and done. Once it transcribes to the protein, it's basically useless after that.
so the idea was get RNA to target this thing that you want it to target. It does this thing and then it's gone. So you fixed the problem and you don't have any long lasting effects. Okay, well, if you're then going to say, okay, well, now we need to make this synthetic RNA highly stable and last a long time. Whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Well, you're just enhancing the problem that Dr. Malone found in the first place and why he gave up on that line of research.
Well, but it fixed the initial irritation. It fixed the initial inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did was it made it so okay, so let's rewind a second. I'm going to use the word S protein. So hyphenated is one word. S protein instead of SPIKE because I'm thinking of words that YouTube will flag. So if you can't spell, it rhymed with Ike. Okay. So S protein is not what the jab puts into you. People keep saying you're jabbing the S protein,
Yes.
but you're not. You're jabbing a blob of fat with an mRNA inside of it that will make the S protein.
That was something Dr. McCullough got wrong early on when he was talking about this and say, whoa, whoa, we shouldn't be doing this. He corrected himself later and said, okay, this is what it's doing, and now this is why I have a problem with it.
Yeah, and so the big problem that we're talking about now with the pseudouridine is that piece of coding that is injected into you now lasts a very, very long time
Mm-hmm.
and is going to keep doing what it's doing as long as the ribosomes in the cells that it gets into are providing a protein making body to it. So it's just sitting there and making another one, making another one, making until it's done, which is a long time because it's trans fats. Okay, not really trans fat. It's the trans fat of amino acids.
It's a good analogy for the layperson, I think.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, it's a synthetic version of something that occurs in real life to make it last longer. And so that's one problem. It lasts forever now, and we're finding it in people a year after in certain circumstances. So this is what muddies the water of the gene therapy versus the just having the bits of code in you. Is it's
Mhm.
lasting so long, we don't know chicken or egg. Is are your genetics starting to take over and produce this for you, or is it just still in you? Is it just still there? And what we're finding from people that have had adverse reactions, and including the German autopsy study, there's just a shit ton of it still there. It's not, it doesn't have to be in your genetic code because you can't get it out of your body. Now, the second part that he goes into, he was talking about the lipid delivery mechanism. One of the problems with that, or one of the great things about it, is it it allows it to be permeable to your cells very easily.
Yeah.
The bad thing is it's not specific to any cell type. So it goes all over your body if it gets out of the deltoid. And what was the big lie in the beginning was it's going to stay in your shoulder. That's what that's what shots that are supposed to prevent disease do, is they stay in the spot of injection. Your body takes care of it in the muscle and you
Hmm.
develop an immune response from it. But because of this lipid uh, delivery system, it don't stay there. It don't
Yeah.
stay there at all because it can permeate your cell walls, which are very sensitive to lipid
And
delivery
the
mechanisms.
CDC never made any sort of announcement or correction on this. And I think it was just last year that they finally took that statement off their website.
Oh, is it was because the last time we did an episode on this, it was still there, remember?
Oh, you're right.
It,
Yeah. I had heard that they had taken it down, but then we went looking for it. I don't remember when that was. And oh no, look, it's still there.
maybe if I have a break in my part of the action, I'll look it up while you're talking. But uh, the so not only is this thing lasting forever, but it's going to through your entire body. And then you add little things like aspiration wasn't part of the protocol, where you put the needle in and you suck back a little bit to see if any blood comes out. If blood comes out, that means you're in a blood vessel. If it gives you resistance and nothing comes out, that means you're straight up in the muscle. So then you would shoot it in. If blood comes out, you would redo it. We had a good side by side. I believe it was Denmark next to Finland or Sweden, one of the other ones it's right next to. So this was great because you have two very, very, very homogeneous demographics between
Hmm.
those two countries because they're both Scandinavian countries butted up against each other. It's not like the US and Mexico or, an Arabic country, Egypt and whatever closest sub-Saharan African country is underneath it. You don't have a demographic change like that. So you basically have the same genetics, the same uh, uh, climate. You have the same basically group of people, same environment for the most part, just
Very,
a
yeah, very
arbitrary border
similar
between them.
societies as well. Yeah.
And one required aspiration, Denmark, and the other did not. And there was 4 times the rate of myocarditis in the one that did not. I don't think that's an accident.
That is something we would call statistically significant.
Not only significant, but there's magnitude. Remember, statistical significance just means that's probably what's going to happen every time. Magnitude is the size of the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
both. It's statistically significant, and the magnitude is so great that you're like, wow, this is socially significant. So it's I think so. Add all those other things to the fact that we have a bad model, a bad skeleton to begin with by basically making it a synthetic gene and putting it in a delivery system that is welcome in every door in your body.
Yeah.
And okay, so most welcome in the most active cells of your body, the ones that are replicating the most, which is great. So I saw this floating the Twitterverse, people saying, "How did in the State of the Union Biden say cancer vaccine, da 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 da," whatever his direct statement was. I should have had that queued up. And I'm like, that's because that's what they were using. That's what they were working on the lipid delivery system for,
Hmm.
was a cancer vaccine, because those are very highly active cells in your body. So they're going to suck up whatever is injected into you with that delivery system. That could be a good thing. We didn't need to use the whole world as an experiment for your system. And by the way, for those that haven't watched our previous episodes, a certain person's husband was in charge of that at Harvard University. And her name rhymes with Alinsky. Ooh, isn't it creepy that her name rhymes with Alinsky?
Yeah, that is. Yikes. Okay, moving on.
Yeah,
All right, so
so
keep
that's
walking us through
basically,
this.
well, that's kind of the gist of it. Is he, and then he goes into who was funding it and everything. And I mean, we all know that it was NIH, NIAI, and
Uh-huh.
The Gates Association. But yeah, that's the thing. He not only brings that part up, but then he talks about other companies that were trying to do it a more traditional way or trying to do it without the pseudouridine,
Hmm.
and how they got no funding. CureVac was one he brought up, which is apparently funded by Elon Musk, amazingly. So I'm surprised that
Um,
didn't pop out earlier.
I have been looking for this for a while, probably 18 months, 2 years now that I first heard this. And I cannot find it. But because for some reason the audio, the video of this came from a local San Diego newscast about this. And they had asked the horse doctor CEO of the Big P, um why this, and he said, and I'm quoting as near to it as I can, as what he said is, I asked my engineers why this technology instead of the old technology, the standard model of how we create these things. And they said because mRNA technology is much faster and much cheaper. He said the quiet part out loud. Why this? Because your profit margin is going to be a hell of a lot bigger. Because if you can make this work, the process of I think we've talked about this before, but reset it. Basically, the way you traditionally create a, say, a measles vaccine. This is the really dumbed down, I don't understand the witchcraft version, but from the layman's point of view, basically what you do is you inject a horse with measles and then you let it run its course, and then you're able to extract out the serum from that. You spin it around until you take out the parts you want, and that's where you get the antibodies from, or the denatured part of the disease. Is so you have to, and I don't remember the numbers. I looked at this a long time ago, but basically, you have to do this a lot to get out enough to create a sizable stockpile to then deliver to the human population. That takes a long time and a
That would
lot
be
of
one way to
steps.
do it. Yeah, that would be a very crude way to do it.
Well, I
What they usually do is they take the virus itself, and then they remove its ability to replicate in some way. So that's one way to do it. There are lots of different ways. Sometimes they attach a certain part of the new virus to an existing virus we already have an immune response to. A common one is what I think no Novavax was trying to do, was put S protein on a cold
hmm,
virus so you're fighting the cold virus like you normally would, but you're developing the code for the S protein. Uh, I don't. It was mixed results on that one, but that's kind of there's a lot of ways to do it. One of it is usually attaching something special about the new virus that you're trying to develop the immunity to something that's not novel to the body, such as the cold virus. So you get sick for a couple days with the cold, but
hmm,
then you're fine. Uh, Another way is to take the virus itself and make it to where it can't replicate. So it comes in there and it starts trying to do the damage it normally does, but it can't make more of itself. So you're basically controlling the viral load to something your body can handle. And then there's the way you're talking about there, which basically you're creating a selective mutation to something that's not exactly harmful to humans, but still has similarities to, and that would actually go back to the original virus, right? The original vaccine development process. Because remember, they discovered that these women that worked with the cows and were exposed to cowpox all the time were not getting smallpox. So basically, the crude way of doing that was they were injecting cowpox into people, and oh my gosh, you had an immunity to smallpox. So yeah, there's lots of ways to do it, but that would be more similar to the
The bottom line
original.
is those techniques take time, and time is money because you're having to pay technicians all along the way. You're having to pay for materials all along the way. Whereas with this technology, I mean, you saw it. We started talking about this seriously. I remember hearing stories about something's going on in China in November. It wasn't until the spring, really spring break of 2020, that the US media really started to latch onto the story. And it was primarily because it had gotten into Europe and was going nuts in Italy. Uh,
Rodeo. I
and
know it was rodeo because I was supposed to go
yes,
to the rodeo to see Cody Johnson with some of my friends, and that was the day rodeo closed.
my wife and her friends went the last day. The day after is when it closed. So they went to the rodeo the last day, the Houston rodeo, the last day it was open. Um, and I also remember because my brother and his family were on a European trip for their spring break, and we were sitting here watching the news going, are they going to be able to get back home?
Well,
Because they were starting to close down flights.
Nicole and Ben and her sister and her daughter were at Disney that week,
Yikes.
and so
Well,
their last day at Disney was the last day Disney World was, which is Florida Disney World, Disneyland, Disney World.
world is Orlando.
Yeah, okay, that's where they were. Yeah, they were there the last day it was open, and it was harder getting back home because of the plane issues. So
I'm looking for, I just had a thought here because the point I'm trying to make is how think about how fast. Okay, so grain of salt, but it does have three sources here on Wikipedia that the first news reports of Operation Warp Speed was on April 29th of 2020. So Operation Warp Speed starts in April, and at the beginning of December, we have an announcement that we have a vaccine that is safe and effective.
mhm.
Okay, that's how fast it went. That's ludicrously fast. Okay, and in fact, that is what Dr. McCullough's big from the very beginning. He was saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Okay, this is going way faster than we usually do, and we haven't done our due diligence in evaluating these things. We haven't gone through the normal steps because we're going so fast." And so even before he started to see specific things that he was commenting on of here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem, his first statements were, I have been part of hundreds of these things, and this is not how we do it, and we are going way too fast. Did you have any more to add from the McCullough part of it, or from the following chapter of the witchcraft of all this?
No, I would just one more thing. Yeah, one more thing. I would point out that he does say that there is a use for this stuff, and part of it is
Mm,
is the
yeah.
speed of being able to do it. It was more of the ineptitude on what was toxic about it. Why did they pick the S protein? That was very short-sighted. I remember seeing a chart that was if you had the commie cough, what the antibody levels were the for the different proteins were after having the infection, and
Mm,
S protein was the highest because it's the first thing your body sees. It's the part that attaches to you. Then it was membrane brain protein, which was just a little bit lower, and then all the other proteins, the 20 proteins that make up the actual virus itself, once it gets into your system, where it was we're just tapered down to the nucleus being the worst because it's the last thing you come in contact with. But they were short sighted because they just saw that number. you get the best response from this protein in the thing. And it's first, so maybe it'll help you fight it faster when they could have chosen a safer protein like the membrane, which in and of itself is not toxic like the S protein was. So,
So that's a really good point on Dr. Malone, um, because uh, I think that's why he's so dangerous to the narrative, because he is much more nuanced and middle of the road than, say, someone like Dr. McCullough, who we've talked about, we respect, but he gets rather emotional because he was so personally attacked. You can understand why, but Dr. Malone is much, his delivery is very calm and very clinical, and
well,
he's
and it's a
much more
different argument
middle of the
too.
road. Yeah,
McCullough's argument is more black and white. Let me treat my patients.
true. That's
That's
true.
basic. That's basically his whole argument.
So it's like,
Malone's is, well, you know what? This could be good. Here's the three things wrong with it. You used S protein, you used the pseudo uridine, and you did the nanotechnology. You do this without those three things, it might have been okay.
it's like Steve Baker is, we've referenced him before. He's the Blaze reporter that has been arrested and is being charged for being there on January 6th, filming, asking questions. He is very obviously a reporter doing reporting, and it doesn't matter. And if you look at the charging document, what they're charging him with really is things he said after the fact, not with what happened on January 6th. And I think a big reason he's being charged when others have not been is because he is also that way. Because there are a lot of people on the right who, after the first batch of film came out, of a video that Carlson talked about, and it was a big story for a minute. And so there were a bunch of people on the right saying, see, this is all nothing. This was all false flag. This
Mm-hmm.
was all the feds. Steve Baker has gone through the video and said, well, no, hold on a second. Look, here are some incidences and some specific people doing things that are clearly felonies, and something should be done about it. But also, here are all of these other people who are just calmly walking through the Capitol and obeying police orders when they are told to do or not do something. And because he's just calling balls and strikes, and because he's just trying to, as best as he can, get to the truth of the matter, I think that's why he's being targeted. In much the same way that Dr. Malone is so dangerous to the narrative, because a, 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 an obvious partisan is easy to ignore,
Mm-hmm.
because whether they're right or not, you can paint them as a partisan because that's what they
Just
are.
just like I said about the zealots that were like, I knew this from the beginning. Well, you may have had some things right, but
Well,
your
I
reasoning for doing so was your partisan nature.
go to, um if we don't have to show our Rumble intro and put this on Rumble, I reference Senator Ron Johnson. Look for his website, his
Go ahead.
page on
Do you still
Rumble.
have it up on a tab? Go ahead and show that again.
Let me bring it up here again.
Yeah.
So he has been having uh hearings on, he's the only one who seems to give a darn on uh jab complications. And they, last week or the week before, had hearings, and on his Rumble page, his staff put together a highlight clip because it's hours of testimony. And so this is about a 15-minute video. I'm not going to play it because it's on Rumble. It's not on YouTube, but I just wanted to show it so you can make sure you find what I'm talking about to check it out for yourself. But the reason it popped into my head when you said that is because of who's on the front here.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the first things that made me go, and I was sharing with my dad because this is, one of his areas of expertise, was you, for one of the first things that made you go, was Dr. Brett Weinstein going through the numbers of, when you still weren't allowed to talk about this, of, well, this is a mutation from a bat. And he was just going through the numbers of, do you know what has to happen for that to happen? I think the analogy he used was like getting struck by lightning twice. The same person being struck by lightning twice. That's
Yeah, because okay, so let me witchcraft that a little bit more. So there's two things that have to happen. So the if it's going to be the wildlife origin, if it's going to be the wet market story, right? You have to have a something that infects a certain animal, which could have been the pangolin or the bat or whatever they're talking about here, has to infect a certain animal, and all of those are so completely not human. The only thing we have in common is mammal, really.
mm-hmm,
So it would have to be something that infects that animal, make the jump to a human, and then adapt in a way or already be adapted that it infects the human and can actually live in that host, which is different because our immune system is completely different than an animal. That's why an animal can go drink out of the stream and we'll get dysentery, right? It's our immune systems are completely different, adapted in different ways to different things. And the amount of viruses we share back and forth from animals is not much. But this thing made that jump, theoretically made that jump. So there's
mm-hmm.
your first lightning strike you were talking about.
And this was very early on when you weren't allowed to point out, hey, there's a giant institute of virology right there next to that wet market where
And just
supposedly
minor
this.
coincidences. But then
Ooh,
there's a second thing it has to do. It has to develop the ability to jump from human to human. So it had to
yes,
first have the ability to jump from the animal to human. Then it had to have the ability to jump from human to human.
yes.
That's the second lightning strike.
And I believe the example there is I think it's bird flu, which is really bad, but so far as
But you
I
got it
know,
from the bird and then you died.
exactly.
You didn't really give it to anybody else.
You get infected from the bird, but then you could not pass it on to another human.
Mm-hmm.
So
Or it was very the viral load had to be so great that you
yeah.
basically were eating another bird.
So it
Mm.
had a pretty disturbingly high mortality rate, but what's the other number? What's the the infection rate or whatever?
The R factor, yeah.
The R factor.
Yeah.
That was very low because you could only get it from the animal. It
Hmm.
hadn't learned, it hadn't mutated to be able to pass from human to human yet.
Which is great because that one sucked.
Yes.
That one had
Uh,
a very high death rate.
so I'm sending you a link here that I want to embrace the darkness and wrap this up. But while you're pulling that up, why does this matter and why do we keep harping on this? Why do I keep harping on this? Well, I love Chris Williamson and modern wisdom, but I also like some
Wait,
good old-fashioned old wisdom. So
hold on. How do I go back? Because I was running through the commercial on that so I could.
I don't know. But while you're
So,
pulling that up,
well,
I'm
I can't do anything when you took the screen. That's the
oh,
thing.
you just escape to get out of the full
Oh,
screen there. Um, where is it? Okay, so this is Ecclesiastes, and um, most people know Ecclesiastes from eat, drink, and be merry under the sun. Okay, so that's verse 15. This is the one everybody knows because it's great. So I commended enjoyment because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry, for this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. Great. But that's like knowing John 3:16 and forgetting what comes next, which is also important.
or
Well,
my favorite is you. Maybe you could tell me the verse, the one where lay your burdens on God, or just pray about it, and everybody just says uses it as the crutch of what's in
uh,
God's hands.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I prayed about it, so I'm fine.
Yeah, there are other things that go along with that. I think it was
Well, there's about how many pages is the Bible?
a lot.
99% of it is about what you do and how you live your
Mhm,
life. And then there's that 1% that says, but also leave it in God's hands and don't worry too much.
mhm.
And they take that 1% because that allows them to be assholes.
I think the originator of this idea was Augustine, who was one of the early theologians of the early church, like third, fourth century. Uh, and then it has been adopted by many people since, which is pray like it's all in God's hands, work like it's all in yours.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, So, but before we can get to the eat, drink, and be merry, we have to deal with real life, which is the verse before that. Because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he does not fear before God. Because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. If you don't deal with a wrong and deal with it quickly, it encourages the wrong. It encourages people to do, because this is the worldview difference between people who ascribe to something like the Bible or a philosophy like that, which is at our core, we're not really good people. At our core, it's the idea of morality. True morality is what you do when no one is looking, because at our core, we would happily cut corners. We would happily do something, even if it harms someone else, if it gets us ahead. Our nature is to do that. So if we can get away with it, and anyone who has ever been a child, let alone has kids, knows this. If you let them get away with it, they do it more. And
Yeah.
that's why I sent you this clip from a great movie, which I think it may be available on YouTube, free with ads, the whole movie, which if you have an up-to-date ad blocker, you don't have to watch the ads. Let me set this up real quick. You've got two titans of you know of this era. You got Spencer Tracy and Burt Lancaster. And Burt Lancaster here is is playing someone who's basically an amalgamation of several different real life people. Because Judgment at Nuremberg, this movie is not. There were a couple of movies made about the main trial, the trial that everyone knows of Goering and Hess and the big guys, the class A, the big time um, war criminals. The people on trial here were judges. And Burt Lancaster's character there, I can't remember his name, but there was one primary person that he was based on who did everything he could to get to find loopholes and find ways of rejecting death sentences or rejecting um uh uh orders to send people to concentration camps. And the uh the the bureaucrats and the parliament kept closing the loopholes, kept tightening the things down until he had no choice but to sign these death warrants. And that was his defense: is I did everything I could. I did everything I could, but eventually the law gave me no wiggle room and I had to follow the law. That was his defense. It was the same as I was just following orders, but it was I had to follow the law. And this is
Well, that is actually a good defense because that's a contract under duress.
to an extent, but that's why I wanted to play this
Well,
clip
I mean, it depends on
because
what the consequence of not following the law was.
exactly.
You know.
But Spencer Tracy's response to him is why this clip is so great.
Okay, so I'm gonna put a disclaimer here. If you see it, just clip ahead, and we're talking about other stuff, and you never see the clip. It's because Heath keeps bringing up these movie clip website, YouTube pages that have permissions we don't have. So I'm going to play it here. If you don't see it, that means I had to clip it out because luckily the one thing about copyright issues is they give you a chance to just clip it out. Uh, so
Yeah.
so at least we'll be able to get the video up here. And I don't think this will be on YouTube. I don't think we touched on anything that will get us a strike here. All right. So let me share with sound.
By all that is right in this world, your verdict was a just one.
Thank you. What you said in the courtroom, it needed to be said.
Judge Hayward, the reason I asked you to come those people, those millions of people.
Just pausing it to help us get through some copyright stuff.
One of the clips you can find from this the Fandango movie clips is the kind of the core of Burt Lancaster's testimony when he's on the stand and he's making the appeal that, you know, how did this happen? Because Germany was at such a state that we didn't care about, we could willfully ignore all of the warning signs of Hitler because of all the good he made us feel. And he also makes the rational point that was also a defense at the Nuremberg trials, which is you, the world, who are now judging us, you started this because he takes over Austria. Fine. He wants the Sudetenland. You gave it to him. He remilitarizes the Rhineland. You let him. You're part of this too.
I never knew it would come to that. You must believe it. You must believe it.
Herr Jagger, it came to that the first time you sentenced a man to death you knew to be innocent.
All right, stop it there. That's the point. That's the whole line. That's the line of the whole movie. That wraps up all of the trial, all of the testimony. That's the point. I didn't know it would come to this. How could it not come to this? How could you not keep rolling down that slippery slope the first time you sentenced a man to death that you knew to be innocent, but you were just following the law? When you look at the documents, the doctor documents we now know that are already bad. And again, how could you not know it would come to this? How could you not know that this many people would be hurt this badly the first time you cut that corner? The first time you said, yeah, but we need to get this out quickly. Yeah, but. Yeah, but. Yeah, but.
Okay, so this is actually in there. Let me get the exact numbers he brings up. There's this part of it. Have I told our audience, and I'm being sarcastic when I said that I hate mathematical models?
A few times.
Just a couple times. Well, he brings up the numbers that were thrown at these companies and at him at the time, that were, if we don't do this, then this many people will die. And if we do this, this many people will die. And they turned out to be completely incorrect because that's why mathematical models suck. But if you believed those numbers at the time, you thought you were doing a good thing. Maybe I'm thinking of the other lady. Yes, it was the other lady. So it is the next chapter. December 13th, 2020. Let's see. Let me start at the beginning. To illustrate the dichotomy between the promise of the jab, insert other word for that, And the sobering reality, consider that the New York Times predicted on December 13th, 2020, that at 95% efficacy, there would be just 131,200 COVID cases in the US. Without the jab, they predicted there would be roughly 2.4 million cases. So if you believe that number and you believed you were going to do the thing that caused it to be the other number, the adverse events were very much outweighed by the benefit. The problem was it didn't live up to the promise.
And the more we learn, the more we see how many yeah buts it took you to get to that point. That, whoa, we were just looking at the numbers. No, 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 no. Because in order to get to those numbers, you had to make a bunch of yeah buts that were, to Spencer Tracy's point, convicting a man to death that you knew to be innocent. But to the from Burt Lancaster's point of view, from his character's point of view, well, but I had no choice because I was following the law. Yeah, except that the law was unjust and you knew it. And more to the point of the analogy there is that, and you knew it all these steps along the way that you kept doing instead of trying to find a way to interrupt this process that you could clearly see the rails you were on.
Mm-hmm. No, you talked about the awakening moment. Remember, mine was not Weinstein. Mine was my own having the disease, being a front runner for the jab because of underlying medical conditions, and the fact that they tried to not let me not take it. No, you still need it. You still need it. I'm like, no, I just got over the illness. That was my first kind of step to waking up moment. I was like, wait a minute, no, I at least understand basic virology. I might as well have had the thing you're offering me right now. This isn't a cure for something. This is a preventative thing. Too late for me. But then they wouldn't stop hounding me. They're like, no, you have a comorbidity. You have a heart condition. Da, 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 da. I'm like, yeah, that's probably a reason not to do it right now.
And that's again something we talked about last time or not last time, a couple times ago when I brought up the Florida grand jury initial report, and they show the facts and figures and point out, turns out the number one comorbidity was age.
Oh yeah.
Almost everything else is negligible.
Well, no, not the naughty obesity word was not negligible because a 30-something person who was obese had the same outcomes as a 75-year-old
Yeah.
healthy person.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, back to the whole point of this, we knew it at the time, and I've referenced this before, was very early on one of the scariest cases. And when the Western media started paying attention is what happened in Italy. Italy had a very old population
Keyword
at the
had.
time. Had.
Yeah.
And so very early on, I don't remember the exact numbers, so I don't want to quote them, but it was staggering the number of fatalities that were over, I believe it was 80 years or older. And it was a staggering number of almost all of
I
them.
think the big indicator was within 1 year of their predicted life anyways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was just that little thing that pushed them over the edge, which could be a cold too, could be a flu, could be, an auto accident you didn't die from, but you died because you were already old and on the way out anyways. It could be anything that just made you a little less healthy than you were because you were already almost there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the other one was the original China numbers before they completely just shut everything down and stopped counting peasant deaths. Don't forget that part. But the problem with that is you're at the time, at least, I don't know if they've changed things since then and made a push or if those people were just weeded out of the population by it. But the average male for someone our age, male Chinese citizen has been a chain smoker for 30 years.
Yeah.
So that's gonna affect you with a respiratory disease. That slight comorbidity there. It's not just a smoker, but I mean, watch old kung fu movies, man. They're always smoking in
Yes.
those things.
Yes.
The 80s kung fu movies, not the ones that were set way back in time, but the ones that were set in the
Well, even the
80s.
ones way back in time, they have a pipe, or
Yeah.
if it's like set in like the 1800s or early 1900s, they have that the long stem with the cigarette holder from the
Hmm.
from the teens and 20s that were so fashionable. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
also, Drunken Master is on Amazon Prime right now. So if you want a little bit of old Jackie Chan
classic.
fun,
All right. Well, speaking of fun, let's pause there,
and then
and
we'll
then we
move
will
on to
switch
fun
to some fun
stuff.
stuff. All right. Now that we have done our duty and due diligence as responsible citizens, ranting about the terribleness, let's have a little fun, and we can switch to sports ball and have a little uh enjoyment, diversion. It's springtime, which means there's nothing going on that either of us care about, but off-season moves are happening in football, and spring training is going on in baseball. And one of the things that popped into my head that I think I've asked about before, but we really haven't spent a lot of time in, is, since it's spring training, load management, one of the newest buzzwords in strength and conditioning. Is there actually anything to it?
Yes. Obviously. I mean, this is with all things physical. Dose response, just like with medicine. Some is good. You get to a point where you reach a peak where more is not better, and then you hit another point where more is harmful. And so that peak is going to shift depending on the athlete, their genetics, their training history, how well prepared for the season they are, all of that. Now, load management is huge now because people don't stop playing. So we have to do load management because they have no heal time. They don't have an off season.
Mm-hmm.
And even the professionals, I mean, look at baseball. When do they stop playing?
Well, if you're into the playoffs, then I think the World Series, because of the extra playoffs, now runs into the first week or two of
And we'll
November.
say worst case because if you're planning as every team should be planning as if they're going to win the World Series right now.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be managing the load of their players to go all the way. And so let's say worst case scenario. So what was the end?
Let's say second week of November.
Second week of November. When do they start again? March 28th this year.
And then but
But
pitchers and catchers
but
report to spring training in February.
February, yeah, it's usually around my birthday, so around Valentine's Day. Uh, so you've got beginning of November to halfway through February is the only off season you have. So 1, 2, 3 full months and change.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a very long time, especially since you start throwing again in December. You take the one, if you're a pro, you take the 1 month off if you're smart, and then they start throwing again in December to work their volume up and to where they're actually showing up in spring training or yeah in what did you say, spring training, right? In spring
Yep.
training, so that way you can make the damn team. Now, I guess someone like Verlander or that's the only starting pitcher I can name. You could probably rattle off a few
Okay.
that
I've just
that are guaranteed.
looked up the dates, and game 5 of the World Series was on November 1st. So it could have gone a few more days after that if they had played game 6 and 7. November 1st was game 5 of the World Series, and pitchers and catchers reported uh to spring training on the 14th and 15th for the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. So that's not a lot of time.
Yeah, and say they take 2 weeks of personal time after the season. So realistically, we're going to say 3 months. Two months,
Yeah.
December and January, and then a little bit of change on that. That's not a big off season, especially if I've got to do some tissue development. which you should be doing every year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got to progress that to not only to strength, but to power. So you're adding a ballistic element to the power, to the strength. Not a whole lot of time in there. Now, here's where I think people like Nolan Ryan are wrong, because Nolan Ryan was a beast physically going into it. And if you've got that athlete, then that's great. But I guarantee you the majority of the players going into getting at this level in this generation are not that robust. And here's why. Because we're entering the generations where the parents are convinced, not the kids, the parents are convinced year-round baseball is where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a bunch of kids that become young adults, that become probably professionals just from sheer numbers, because you can't weed out the ones that did a different track to this, especially since they get discriminated against at a young age, that are doing other things in off season. Yeah, you've basically got someone who's a broken machine by the time they get to that level. You have to do load management. Nolan Ryan was riding bulls in the off season. You don't think his body's a little bit robust?
Yeah. Yeah. It's he is a genetic freak, and if you watch the documentary that his sons produced, kind of in tribute to him, Facing Nolan, and it's a pretty good biography of him, and he or someone in there makes the point that he literally doesn't know how many pitches he threw because they didn't start having pitch counts until pretty recently. The pitch count is a pretty recent thing, and he guesstimates that in a lot of the full games that he threw 150, 160 pitches, and he threw a lot of complete games. Okay, he's not typical. That's like, I can't remember if I said this while we were recording or not, but that would be like me asking Randy Couture, "Hey, can I have a UFC career? I'm 44 years old." "Yeah, sure, go for it. You can have a couple fights. You'll be fine." I'm not Randy Couture.
Yeah, but it's also a different game now. Just like Randy
Mhm.
Couture would probably have a lot of trouble in today's
Mhm.
fighting field. I mean, I was okay for the level I was at, but even that was back in the day where a certain skill set or skill management can outperform athleticism on almost every curve, or just being a super raw athlete could beat a skilled person. Now they're all both.
Mhm.
And Randy Couture was a little bit of both,
Mhm.
but he would have been fighting a bunch of other Randy Coutures. And that's the way. Look how similar everybody looks now compared to back then. You had so many different body types fighting each other, especially in the heavyweights. You
Mhm.
know, now everybody looks. It's like a cookie cutter UFC fighter is winning the championship every time.
Well, and that is one of the things that put my antenna up about load management is I would be hearing these numbers and thinking, okay, but is that what that person needs? What where are your long-term um double blind studies of load management in a large cohort that lets you know this is the standard, this is what we have to do, right? Uh, you
Well,
know,
I'll tell you where it's helped and where it hasn't helped. Okay, so again, we're in an era where everybody's doing year round. Even when you get to the professional level, your off season is basically nothing. Uh, Even in college, they'll put you in certain summer programs and everything, so you're always playing. Where load management helps is with rotator cuff injuries, because rotator cuff is a muscle, or it's four muscles actually, four muscles that hold your shoulder in place, and the better they're working, the better your shoulder is going to feel. And the more mobile your shoulder is with great rotator cuff muscle activation, the healthier your shoulder is going to be. And look what injuries have gone way down. Rotator cuff injuries.
mhm,
Load management helps with that because there's that dose response. It's a muscle, it's worked. You manage it so it's not overworked, and it recovers by the next time you'd go. Because it's very plastic. It recovers very well. Where it doesn't work, look what injuries have gone up. Tommy John's.
mhm,
Tommy John's is a ligament. Ligament. Okay, so Tendon is muscle to bone. Ligament is bone to bone. So that's the difference between the two. Ligaments don't heal very fast because they have limited blood flow. It is a tissue that is not meant to be. It's like a guardrail on a road. You don't slam against the guardrail every time you take the turn, but it's there if you need it. That's what ligaments are. They're there if you need them. They kind of keep everything in line so the muscles can do their work, and the muscles are what protect the joint. If you depend on that ligament all the time, which you do in that external rotation when they're getting basically 180 before we've shown that pick so many times.
Scherzer, yeah.
Yeah.
He's
There's
the
going to be
extreme
micro
example.
tears in that ligament. That takes more than 2 months. And if you're playing year-round ball, you never get the time for that to repair itself. It's trying, it's doing the best it can. It's going to be working. So we'll put a point system, 5 points of damage in a game. By the next time you're doing it, it repaired 2 points. Then you do 5 points of damage and it repairs 2. Then eventually you run out of points. And if you started at 100, whereas the rotator cuff, it's a series of muscles. So you do 5 points of damage, and you've mitigated that load. You're probably going to be healing 5 points by the next time because it heals so well. There's a lot of blood flow. There's a lot of nutrients that get shipped to that system. So where it does help is with the muscular issues. Where it doesn't help is the long-term effects it has on the ligaments.
And a good example of that are Japanese pitchers when they go to the MLB, because the season is shorter in Japan, because there are fewer teams. So they're on a 6-day schedule. You come to the States and the starting pitchers here are on a 5-day rotation. So that extra day of rest that you're not having, and I was trying to find numbers real quick and I couldn't find it. I've seen them in the past of the number of Japanese starting pitchers who have come to the US and how quickly they end up having Tommy John surgery after they get here. Uh, um, Yu Darvish is a recent example. And then, oh crap, who's the kid from who was with the Angels who just went to the Dodgers? Um, Same thing with him. I don't remember if it was Tommy John or another injury, but he hasn't pitched, I think, in a year. He's still been hitting because he's a DH, but he had to take like a full year off. So I think it was Tommy John's. So he's another one. And so there's definitely something there. My problem with the whole idea of load management is the one size fits all rather than this is a general guideline. Now, how do we apply it? There's also a downside to this. Now, I don't care about this as much because I've never really been a basketball fan. I have been a fan of teams when we were in San Antonio, and it was hard not to like the Spurs, because you had a really a great group of guys and a bunch of plucky underdogs who were kind of the whipping boys of the West for a long time, and then they got Duncan, and they started destroying people, and it was great. And I watched a lot of the Thunder when they first moved to OKC because I was living in Stillwater at the time. So I don't care about this as much personally, but it is an indication of where there could be a problem in other sports that you need to wake up and pay attention to, which is anecdotally, I have heard a lot of people personally, people I know, family and friends who like basketball who have complained about this, but then commentators talking about this, like Whitlock and others, of the regular season for the NBA is boring now, in large part because of load management. You never know if you're going to go to a game and actually see the superstars that you want to see because so few of them play. Almost none of them play all 80, I think it's 82 games for a regular season. So nobody cares about the regular season anymore. And the ticket sales are starting to reflect that you're not selling out even even good teams in good markets aren't selling out in the regular season because nobody cares until the postseason, because it's all load management until you get to the postseason, and then everybody, plays every game so long as they're healthy. That's a problem, economically for the league, that they're gonna have to figure out, or their popularity is going to wane even more than it already is. And uh this is a point I've heard Whitlock make a couple of times, is the NBA is actually underperforming and has been for years. If you look at the popularity of the sport in the general public, and he used the example of, my grandma will go outside and shoot some hoops, and yet she doesn't watch from Indianapolis. She wasn't a regular watcher of the Pacers. She should have been. She would go out and shoot hoops, and yet she would only actually watch the Pacers every once in a while, like if they were in the playoffs. There's something wrong there when you have all these people who will go out and shoot hoops but aren't regular watchers, versus how easy is it to get, just to go play one-on-one with someone, versus how difficult is it to get people out to go play some baseball. And yet baseball is still ahead, in the US at least, is still ahead of the NBA in terms of popularity. And you're only making it worse with load management. And are you actually helping these people? It doesn't necessarily seem so. So your general template of load management isn't working because you're apparently not applying it properly, because you're still having to deal with a high degree of injuries amongst your superstars who you're trying to protect. And that was my other thought about load management is, well, wait a minute, are you actually making it worse because there is such a thing as resting too much?
Mm-hmm.
If I do like a 5x5 heavy lifting sequence, and then I take like 4 weeks off and decide to do it again, well, wait a minute, I better not be slapping that same weight back on there, because I haven't done anything for 4 weeks. I've been sitting on my butt. That's a potential problem right there. That is a potential purveyor of perpetual peril. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that's. I think you hit it right on the head. The NBA load management is. I'm sorry. This is one of the reasons I think the NBA has lost its allure. It's become a league of divas.
Oh yeah.
Where when you and I were young watching the NBA, we had Bill Laimbeer and Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, Shaquille O'Neal. You had to body people,
Mm-hmm.
and in this day and age, they play the refs and they rest all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that's uh, you're right. That might be part of the loss of allure.
Jordan's first several seasons, he could not make it even to the Eastern Conference Finals because they couldn't get past the Pistons, because the Pistons literally beat the crap out of Jordan. That's how they dealt with him.
Well, I'll give a good example from what about 15 years ago? The Cavaliers, or not the Cavaliers, the Miami Heat versus the Spurs in the championship. Remember the game where the AC wasn't working in AT&T Center,
Mm,
and the Spurs refused to not play, and the Heat, ironically named, didn't want to play, and basically LeBron sat half the game because he was too hot.
yep.
Yeah, so the toughness level we have to question. And I've worked with some of these diva type athletes before. Track stars are bad. Wide receivers are probably the second worst. I could imagine these really high level basketball players are pretty bad too. But yeah, they would come in and just be like, man, I got to go like 80% today. My left medial semitendinosus is slightly tweaked. I'm like, do you even know what a semitendinosus is? That word you keep using. I do not think it means what you think it means. But they would be like that. That was the way they were. Man, I got to do like 80%. I'm like, how about you just get on the block and you sprint? We're going to do buildups. You're going to go 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of offseason, you wanted to talk football because that's more interesting than spring training.
It's an exciting season for my team. That's why I wanted to. And your team is, as usual, doing nothing. So why don't we start with Dallas since they are doing nothing? We can be done quick. Have they signed anybody worth note that you know of?
Not that I've heard of.
Because Dak Prescott's taking 54 million next
Mhm.
year of salary cap. So next time you're out there saying, sign him, he deserves the money, this is what happens to your team. It don't matter the position, it's just more common at quarterback. We're going to have this problem in 3 years. I guarantee it. And he seems like he's got a good team-oriented head on his shoulders. Maybe he pulls a Brady and takes a big, but not the biggest contract. That's what we're hoping for. We will see. But we signed a stud defensive end, Hunter out of Minnesota, 16 sacks last year. That's not insignificant. That's a sack a game. And you know those came in bunches. So our basically what we've done in the last couple of days is our D line. If we get a corner opposite Stingley, that's even if we re-sign Nelson or we pick up that
Mhm.
cat that wants to come here from Miami, we're gonna have a lot of sacks next year because if you get two corners that can cover, you can't just three-step drop and top and dump. So that's exciting. On offense, on an X's and O's and talent for the money level, I commend this move. But again, anybody who knows me knows this is nails on a chalkboard.
Oh no.
Oh, again, Moneyball, we win. At what cost? Shaking
Oh.
level. So for those that couldn't see and are listening, that was the news story of the Texans trading for Joe Mixon. And he's only going to cost us $5 million on cap. So we're getting a probably top 6 running back in the league
And I
for
think
a
the
$5
Texans
million hit.
had still had some picks stockpiled, so you can afford to give up some picks and still have a decent draft. And that saves all that cap room that you had for free agents. But uh
Yeah. But okay, so if there's a background on that, for those that don't know why I hate Joe Mixon, is this is a bias I have, is the guy who's going to beat up his girlfriend. That kind of bias. I think that's an okay bias to have.
I'm fine with it.
So I was watching the game when he was still in college. So he did this in college. He beat the crap out of her, put her in the hospital. I think he also beat up her friend or something too. But it was a big case where he was suspended for a long time. And his senior year, he comes back to play because OU is like that. They would rather win than have any integrity. And the announcers were doing their best at talking about how it's a redemption story and he's a changed man and everything. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, he scores a touchdown. And after he scores the touchdown, because OU is trash, he runs to the sideline and the whole, not the whole team, but a big chunk of the team does a celebration on the sideline because you weren't allowed to do that on the field in college back then. And they act like they're beating somebody up in a circle. This guy's not a changed man. There's only one thing that requires punching somebody on the ground that he's been involved with. So not only is he trash, that
Is
entire
Wayne
OU
Brady gonna
squad.
have to slap a bit? Oh, except it's not a funny skit on the Chappelle show. It's actually happening in real life. Oh, that's different. Yeah.
So there was no redemption there. Then he gets drafted by the Bengals real high, gets millions of dollars, and is a Pro Bowler almost his entire career. Finally hurts his knee 2 years ago. Has a good season last year, and which means if he's just like the running backs that come back from the ACL tears, he's probably going to have another 2 good seasons, and then he'll start feeling old again. So
Hmm.
we got him at the right price at the right time. If he just wasn't a trash person, so I'm
Yeah.
going into this going contribute to the team, but don't stand out.
And you already have a running back you think can be a real contributor. So you've got hopefully a two-headed monster. So
We don't
from the
have
front,
Singletary anymore.
oh, I
No,
thought you kept him.
he was a free agent. We had only signed him to a 1 year deal, but we do have Pierce, who's coming back from this will be his second season out of an ankle injury, and he started to look good at the end of the year last year. So I'm hoping that this at least makes healthy competition. And I'm like, rookie year Pierce, beat out Mixon, because if you can do that, you're going to be a stud, and I can
Yeah.
root for that.
It does make sense from a front office standpoint if your thinking is we get a he's not a Henry or a Barkley, but he's still good. He's still got, plenty of tread left on the tires, and then we can put our cap money into the line,
Mm-hmm.
which will help both them, the running backs, and continue to help Stroud throw the ball. And if he's going to be throwing for 300 to 400 yards every game, you want that protection. It just sucks that this is the move they made, because from the front office standpoint, it does make sense if that's what their thinking is, but now it's going to be
Yeah,
harder to
no,
root
no.
for
From a football standpoint, we're going to be really good next year.
them.
We're going to be really, really good next year. But again, at the cost of having to swallow my bile every time he has a good play, it's going to be like, ugh.
This is where I'm at. This is from the Dallas Cowboys own website, dallascowboys.com. I don't even know why you put this up there, because this is their um jeez. This is their free agency tracker, updated list of latest Cowboys news. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll. Oh, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. It's on the NFL free agents, veterans. Nobody signed. But here are all of your unrestricted free agents, and you've lost 3 of them to a division rival. Awesome, guys. Awesome. And Fowler's not nothing. He helped make plays when uh Lawrence and uh what's his bucket? I'm old and forgetful. He's a great player, and I draft him every year on our fantasy team, and I can't remember his name because I'm old and forgetful. Anyway, they get all the double teams, so Fowler makes the plays on the other side. So he's not nothing, and you lost him to a division rival.
You know,
Boy.
I see you also lost Pollard to the Titans. And if the
Mhm.
Titans think they're replacing Derrick Henry with Tony Pollard, I understand they're going a different direction with style with Will Levis and everything, but Tony Pollard was only good when he was the tandem with a bruiser.
Exactly. And I said this, last offseason of Pollard is a good use of a tag, because he had a really good season and he might be able to be your number one back, but he had a really bad injury. So if he doesn't come back from that injury, then yes, you overpaid him because of what that franchise tag cost you, but it doesn't cost you any cap space because it's a 1 year thing, and you can say, okay, he's back. He can be our number one back. Now let's see if we can make a deal that doesn't hurt us too bad in the cap. And it didn't work out. Okay, fine. That's what the franchise tag is for. It didn't work out. Let Tennessee have him.
Yeah, and I don't know what we're given for Mixon, but there was another guy out of Cincinnati that we wanted, but they franchise tagged him, which was T. Higgins.
Mm-hmm.
And so now if you want him, you have to give up a lot for
More.
him.
Yeah.
So hopefully with this Mixon deal, maybe they structure something in there where they're like, hey, we're doing this for you and getting this guy off your hands. Let us take Higgins off your hands too, because he's going to be a problem because he's pissed that they franchise tagged him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the franchise tag needs to go personally, but it is still there and teams still use it to the best of their ability. But it always results in this: a player that's pissed off to be there.
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, they're being paid. This is everybody. Oh, why are you sympathetic? They're being paid an average of top 5, and a lot of times they're not worth it. But they're a year older
Hmm.
the next time they try to negotiate a contract.
Hmm.
And not only that, if they get hurt during that franchise year, they have no long-term contract.
Hmm.
So you're taking, yeah, you're getting paid once real big, but you're taking a risk for the rest of your career that was imposed upon you. So if everybody makes the NFL slavery uh, kind of analogies, that's the closest thing to it is the franchise tag. Because you signed a contract, you lived up to that contract, and now you're asking for a new one or you're going to make one with somebody else. That's business. Franchise tag is you cannot, even though you honored your original contract.
Hmm.
And so I think the franchise tag should go. It's I think it's part of ruining the NFL because it's the source of so many holdouts and stuff. Uh,
Well, it's yeah, it's kind of how the Cowboys screwed themselves is because it's one of the reasons Zeke held out when he had, I think, 2 years left on his rookie deal because he had to know they're just going to franchise tag you because of the short shelf life of a running back. So I need to get. I had 2 really good years. I need to get my extension now,
yeah,
and
so
they
so
overpaid him big time.
yeah, some of these players like T. Higgins, who's a young guy, he could probably sign a 5-year contract somewhere, is got to make a decision. Do I sit out this franchise year and not get whatever it is, 15 million or
Hmm.
whatever it is, so I can guarantee that I don't get hurt and I can sign that 5-year, $60 million
Yeah.
contract somewhere else. And that's bad for the sport. That is just bad for the sport. Or they come out and they play and they half-ass it because they're hesitant about getting hurt. That's another part. Yeah, I got my 15 million, but I jogged my routes.
Hmm.
And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for him because other teams are going to see that attitude. It's not good for the fans because they want to see a good game and they want their players to play well. So it's and it would ruin a fantasy football team too because you'd be like T. Higgins, he's always good, and then he goes out and jogs routes. No, I'm excited about our offseason because if they don't pick up a corner in the free agency, there's 2 studs in the draft. They've picked up interior line, they've picked up pass rushers, the edge rushers. Hunter is kind of the replacement for Grenard. Grenard had a great season, but Hunter not only is a sack machine, but plays the run better and he's bigger. Uh,
Hmm.
our linebacking crew is already solid. Our quarterback solid. If we can get another receiver on the other end, which I guess Higgins is off the market, but we could probably pick up one in the draft or find somebody who's at least serviceable. And realistically, with the ones we still have on the team, Stroud was still rookie of the year and a pro bowler.
Hmm.
So an extra receiver would just be bonus, especially since we should have a run game with Mixon. So it's all we have to do is address that interior offensive line and maybe a corner or a defensive back here and there. And we're up there with the elites in the league. We've got about 2 years to get to get it done though, because that Stroud contract is going to be big.
Oh yeah, yeah. If he keeps playing like this, for sure. Yeah. Um, the draft is later than I thought it was. It's at the end of April.
It has been
So
lately.
so we're still 6 weeks away. So there will be um plenty of rumors and moves and whatnot. Um, I'm just scrolling through the the draft page on NFL.com looking at the picks, and it's kind of funny to see, oh, the poor hapless Bears. Hey, you want to know one of the reasons you always suck? You have 4 picks in this draft. Oh no.
Yeah, but one of them is the number 1 pick.
Uh
I'm wondering if they're going
yeah.
to trade Justin Fields for something because he's not a free agent, I don't think. And realistically, he could start on probably 5 or 6 teams. As bad as the quarterbacks in Chicago have been for so long, I am not willing to throw in the towel on Fields yet till I see him on a good team.
Yeah.
Same with
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has had a troubled career, but he was with the Browns
Hmm.
and then with a horrible Carolina team. And then he goes to Tampa Bay, and all of a sudden, everybody's like, hey, he's pretty good. Yeah, he's been pretty good all the time. He was just on the Browns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens when it happens. But I'm not expecting any actual moves from the Cowboys because they never do. So,
I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen with the Cowboys next year. They're going to come out 3-0, and everybody's going to say, we them boys. And then about halfway through the season, because they have zero depth, because they have huge contracts, they're going to start tapering off, and then they're going to lose in the first round of the playoffs. The pattern exists for a reason. It's not just luck. The
yeah.
pattern is there because they have no depth ever, because they've got like 5 massive contracts and scrubs after that.
I was looking for the schedule and they haven't, I didn't know that they did it this way, but they've released the opponents for every team, but they haven't actually set the schedule yet. So,
Yeah, that usually comes out after the draft sometime. And who knows? They're probably trying to add like umpteen million overseas games
internationals
again.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they had London for several years in a row, and then they had Frankfurt this year as well, and they had Mexico City a couple times. Uh,
The
so
draft
who?
is taking place in downtown Detroit. So,
Oh,
who thought that was a good idea?
is everybody ready for their active shooter drills?
I hope so. All right, on that cheering note, I think we've been rambling long enough.
Yes. Okay, so if you see the whole hour and 45-minute-ish video, that means YouTube was nice to us. If not, I'll clip this to the one that I should have introed with it with this part. I'll clip it to if we get a strike. That means I've got a week to work on this anyways. So if you're seeing go to Rumble section and then football and baseball, that means we were on a strike, and we were not on strike. We were striked, and we had to have a week off. So,
Yeah.
so I might as well do some video editing during that week if I have to. So, otherwise, if you saw the whole thing, no medical advice was given by us. Uh, Go to your doctor. Cheer for your favorite team, not just ours. Uh, if your team's making moves in the offseason, put it in the comments. We would like to know. That way Heath can be more depressed.
Yeah, well, you won't see me in the comments section for this, but maybe on Friday I'll have something I could say
You know,
as we
it
get
would
into
be
the
great
darkness even more.
if we could say don't fix it if it ain't broke. Like Kansas City, if nothing happened during the offseason, they didn't lose anybody, they didn't gain anybody for the most part. Well, they also just won the Super Bowl. Don't fix if it ain't broke. But the Cowboys, it broke.
Kansas City has a ton of picks this year too. Oh,
Yeah.
rich get richer. All right, we will see y'all hopefully Friday.
Hopefully Friday for some Wheel of Time. What is on the Wheel of Time next?
We're on a ranch after, so we're embracing the darkness.
Yes. All right. Talk to you later.